The cafe had a warm, inviting atmosphere, the kind of place where people came to escape the noise of the city. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with quiet conversations and the occasional clatter of silverware against porcelain cups. It was a typical afternoon, until Barron Trump walked in. Dressed in a simple black hoodie and jeans, he blended in with the usual crowd, except for one detail: the red MAGA hat perched on his head. It was not something he wore for attention, it was just a hat, a symbol of something that mattered to him. But as soon as he stepped inside, he felt the shift in the room, the subtle glances, the whispers, the way a few customers straightened in their seats exchanging looks. He had learned to ignore it. Barron moved toward an empty table near the window, sliding into the chair and picking up the menu. He was supposed to meet someone in a little while, but for now, he just wanted a coffee. Simple enough. A waiter approached his table. Young, probably mid-20s, with sharp features and a name tag that read Ethan. But there was something about the way he walked up, deliberate, stiff. He did not bother with the usual polite greeting. Instead, he stopped just short of the table, crossed his arms, and let out a small scoff. "Seriously?" Barron looked up, confused. "Excuse me?" Ethan gestured toward the hat. "You're wearing that in here?" For a second, Barron thought he was joking. The tone, however, was anything but playful. "I just want a coffee," Barron said simply, setting the menu down. Ethan did not budge. His lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes narrowing. "Look, man, we don't serve people who support that kind of garbage, so do yourself a favor and take that hat somewhere else." The cafe quieted slightly. A few heads turned, some customers pretending not to listen but clearly aware of what was happening. A couple of people looked amused, smirking as they sipped their lattes. Others looked uneasy but said nothing. Barron let out a slow breath, keeping his expression neutral. He had dealt with things like this before. Some people let their opinions turn into anger, and that anger turned into moments like these. He picked up the menu again, flipping through it casually. "So, are you going to take my order, or do I need to find someone who will?" Ethan let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "I don't think you get it. You're not welcome here." Barron exhaled and set the menu down again, this time with a little more weight. He was about to respond when the bell above the door chimed. The air in the cafe shifted. People turned their heads. And then a voice, calm, yet unmistakably firm, broke through the silence. "Is there a problem here?" Melania Trump had just walked in. The cafe, which had been buzzing with quiet conversations moments ago, now felt frozen in place. Heads turned, whispers stopped mid-sentence, and even the barista behind the counter who had been steaming milk seemed to hesitate as the hiss of the machine faded into the silence. Melania Trump stood just inside the doorway, her posture composed, her expression unreadable. She was dressed in a fitted black coat, her hair falling effortlessly over her shoulders. There was no grand entrance, no loud declaration, just her presence alone commanding attention. Barron exhaled quietly, not surprised, but aware of how the energy in the room had shifted. He had been waiting for her, but he had not expected to need her presence quite like this. Ethan, the waiter, straightened, his initial confidence faltering as he recognized who had just walked in. His jaw tightened, as if he were debating whether to double down or step back. The arrogance in his posture was still there, but his grip on it was slipping. Melania's eyes swept across the scene, landing first on Barron, then shifting to Ethan. She did not ask what was happening. She already knew. The tension in the air, the way Barron's posture remained calm but alert, the way people were pretending not to stare. All of it told her enough. She took a step forward, her heels barely making a sound against the tiled floor. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice steady, without an ounce of hesitation. Ethan blinked, as if snapping out of a daze. He quickly adjusted his stance, clearing his throat. No problem." His tone had changed, but there was still an edge to it. "Just explaining that we have, certain standards for the atmosphere here." Melania's expression did not change. "Standards." Ethan nodded, shifting his weight slightly. "Yeah, we just like to make sure all our guests feel comfortable. And, Certain things make people uncomfortable. His eyes flicked to Barron's hat, but he did not say it outright. Melania let a beat of silence stretch between them, her gaze locked on Ethan's. Then she gave the slightest tilt of her head, as if considering something. "I see," she said finally, her voice as smooth as glass. "So, you remove people based on what makes others uncomfortable?" Ethan hesitated. Not always. Just, when it's something controversial." Melania's lips pressed together for a fraction of a second before she spoke again. "Then, I assume you will not be serving me either?" Ethan's face paled slightly. The shift in power was undeniable. Moments ago, he had been in control, dictating who belonged and who did not. Now, the weight of his own words was pressing back against him. The café remained deathly quiet. Even the customers who had been enjoying the spectacle moments ago now seemed to realize that things had taken a turn. Barron remained still, watching, waiting. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was trapped, and he knew it. Ethan swallowed hard, his confidence cracking under the weight of Melania's gaze. The café had gone from an ordinary afternoon to something else entirely, something no one in the room had expected. The people who had been whispering moments ago now sat frozen, their eyes darting between the waiter and the former First Lady. The manager, a middle-aged man with neatly combed hair and a name tag that read Richard, had been standing behind the counter watching the situation unfold with growing anxiety. Now, sensing the moment slipping out of control, he rushed forward, forcing a strained smile. "Mrs. Trump, I sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding," he said quickly, his voice carrying an edge of panic. "This is absolutely not how we treat our customers." Melania did not look at him right away. She kept her eyes on Ethan, studying him, her expression calm but unreadable. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, clearly feeling the weight of her silence. He had been so sure of himself just minutes ago, so sure that no one would challenge him, that he could make a statement without consequence. But now, standing before one of the most recognizable women in the world, he realized how different things were when the person you belittled actually had the power to push back. Richard, still desperate to fix the situation, turned to Ethan, his polite smile faltering. "Ethan, is this true? Did you refuse service to Mr. Trump?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced around the cafe at the customers watching, at his co-workers behind the counter, at the phones subtly being held up to record. He knew he had backed himself into a corner. I just thought," his voice wavered, the previous arrogance gone. "I thought we had the right to refuse service." Melania finally spoke, her voice smooth but unwavering. "You have the right to refuse service," she said. "But what you do not have the right to do is treat someone differently because of your personal opinions." Ethan's face flushed. He wanted to defend himself, to argue, to make some kind of justification, but there was none. He had not denied Barron service because of any rule. He had done it because he thought he could. Barron finally leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but pointed. I wasn't expecting special treatment. I just wanted a coffee." The words landed harder than anything else had. There was no anger, no aggression, just a simple, undeniable truth. The cafe remained silent. The weight of the moment settled over everyone. Ethan looked down, exhaling shakily. He had lost control of the situation completely. Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Trump, Mrs. Trump, again, I deeply apologize." He turned to Ethan. "We'll talk about this later." Ethan nodded slightly, looking away, his face flushed with shame. Barron glanced at his mother. Melania gave a small nod. The moment was over, but the lesson remained. Ethan stood there, his shoulders tense, his hands clenched at his sides. He had never felt more exposed. The quiet murmurs from customers, the weight of the stares, the way the energy in the room had shifted. It was suffocating. Moments ago, he had been in control, speaking with confidence, believing he was making a stand. But now, confronted with his own actions, he realized how quickly everything had unraveled. Melania didn't move from where she stood. She didn't have to. Her presence alone commanded the space, and there was no mistaking the expectation in her eyes. This wasn't just about Barron. This was about something bigger, something Ethan himself had failed to understand when he had let his personal bias dictate his actions. Barron, still seated, watched Ethan with an expression that was almost unreadable. There was no anger, no smugness, just quiet observation. He had dealt with this kind of reaction before, but it was rare to see someone forced to confront it in real time. The cafe manager, Richard, cleared his throat. He had dealt with difficult customers before, but this was different. He had a choice to make, and he knew there was only one right answer. "Ethan," he said carefully, his voice low but firm, "I think you owe Mr. Trump an apology." Ethan hesitated. The last thing he wanted to do was admit he had been wrong, especially in front of all these people. But there was no way out of this. His chest tightened, and for the first time he truly felt the weight of what he had done. He inhaled sharply and looked at Barron, his voice quieter than before. I'm sorry." Barron tilted his head slightly. "For what?" Ethan swallowed, his face burning with embarrassment. He could have left it at a vague apology, but he knew that wouldn't be enough. He exhaled, his shoulders deflating slightly. "For treating you differently because of a hat. That wasn't right." Melania studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. "No, it wasn't." The tension in the cafe didn't disappear, but it shifted. Some customers exchanged looks. Others turned their focus back to their drinks, as if realizing the situation had run its course. The spectacle was over. Barron didn't look triumphant. He didn't look pleased. He just gave Ethan a small nod, acknowledging the apology but not making it easy. "Thank you," he said simply. Ethan nodded back, then quickly turned on his heel and walked toward the back of the cafe, disappearing behind the counter. Richard let out a small breath, then turned to Barron and Melania. "I understand if you don't want to stay, but I'd like to personally offer your drinks on the house." Barron smirked slightly, lifting the menu again. "I just want a coffee." Melania, with the smallest smile of approval, finally took a seat across from him. The cafe slowly returned to normal, but the energy was different now. Conversations picked up again, the clinking of coffee cups and quiet hum of background music filling the space. Still, every now and then, someone stole a glance at the table where Barron and Melania sat, as if trying to process what had just happened. Barron stirred his coffee absently, his expression unreadable. He had expected resistance, even a few looks, but he hadn't expected the situation to escalate like that. And he definitely hadn't expected his mother to step in so effortlessly, shifting the entire dynamic of the room with just a few words. Melania took a slow sip of her tea, her posture composed as ever. She had seen many moments like this before, moments where people let their emotions get the best of them, where a single symbol could ignite a reaction stronger than reason itself. But what mattered wasn't the confrontation. It was what people learned from it. Richard, the manager, stopped by their table again, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. "I just want to thank you both for your patience," he said carefully. "I'll be having a conversation with my staff about this. It won't happen again." Melania offered him a polite nod. "It is not just about us. It is about how people treat one another." Richard exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah," he admitted. "I think I needed that reminder too." Barron glanced toward the counter where Ethan had disappeared. The young waiter hadn't come back out, and he probably wouldn't for a while. It was strange. He had walked into the cafe just wanting a quiet moment, and instead, he had ended up in the middle of a situation that made everyone, even the people just watching, reconsider their own actions. As they finished their drinks, Barron leaned back slightly. "You didn't have to step in, you know." Melania raised a perfectly shaped brow. "Of course I did." He smirked slightly. "You could have let me handle it." Melania gave a soft chuckle. "I did. I just made sure they were listening." Barron shook his head with a small smile, but he knew she was right. Sometimes it wasn't about winning an argument. It wasn't about fighting back with anger. It was about standing firm, about showing people that kindness and respect weren't about who you agreed with, but how you chose to act, no matter who was watching. As they stood to leave, a woman near the door caught Barron's eye. She had been sitting quietly through the whole exchange, But now, she gave him a small nod of respect. He nodded back. They stepped outside, the cool air greeting them as they walked toward the car. As Barron pulled his hat down slightly, Melania looked over at him. "Will you stop wearing it?" she asked. He smirked. "Not a chance." She smiled knowingly. Respect isn't about who you agree with. It's about who you choose to be, even when no one else is willing to stand up. If you see something wrong, don't stay silent. The smallest action can change everything. If this story moved you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where someone stood up for what was right? Share your story below. And if you believe in kindness, respect, and standing firm in what you believe, hit that subscribe button for more powerful stories that inspire and challenge the way we see the world. Let's keep the conversation going.